Go, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Mr. Luke Swann.
Hi there, Cameron. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Luke. Luke, thank you very much for coming on to the 5th episode now of CamTalks, my new podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's such a pleasure. I haven't seen you for a while. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
It's been a while, mate. It's been a while. And thank God for this new co-working space up here in Manchester on Market Street. Shout out to B-Work. Is it B-Work?
Yeah, B-Works is great, yeah. It's just open to the public and you can come in, get a free coffee, sit down, use the Wi-Fi.
I don't believe in anything that's free, mate. There's got to be a catch. What's the catch to this place then?
The catch is that they get a bit of exposure, so it's nice for them.
That's it.
And they want to do a bit of good.
Well, that's it. I mean, we're in a public space right now, as you can probably tell with some of the music choice that's going on. But I figured we would try and get you here because, Luke, you do an incredible amount of work in the social impact space, particularly around working with kids in schools and obviously to help them, encourage them to read more. Give us a very quick rundown of who you are and what it is you stand for.
Yeah, so my name's Luke and I'm the director of The Prologue, which, as you said, is a children's social enterprise. So I started off as a children's author. I've worked as a teacher before and I've done lots of educational writing, and I just really see a lot of social inequality that children face and young people in general. So I'm working to try and counter that, some of that inequality.
It's a mad mission, man. I mean, like, what makes you care for kids that much, honestly?
There are a lot of things. I think growing up in Oldham, which recently was considered the most deprived town in the whole of England, was a really bad experience, but a great experience at the same time in terms of seeing what the problems are for a lot of children. And as the eldest of 5 siblings, I felt like a bit more of a parental figure because I was a lot older, and I had a very nurturing mum. And then when I went off to university, I worked at my old secondary school as a teacher as well, worked in a primary school as an SEN supervisor, and did a lot of work with children, which has led up to what I'm doing now.
I love it, man. I mean, I've been into a couple of schools with you as we've, worked together in the past. So the Prologue is, is it a charity or is it a non-profit? What's your business model?
So non-profit, social enterprise, so we want to do as much good as we can. And I did work around with which model to use, whether to go with a charity or a social enterprise or a business. And it's still something I'm not sure about, but I think just having the biggest impacts is what's the most important to me. And I'll use any vehicle to do that.
I love it, man. So listen, the thing about, social enterprises, does that mean that you're broke all the time? Is this going to be, just can't make any profit? What's the deal with this?
So for the first 2 years of the Prologue, I chose not to pay myself.
Yep.
It is a struggle anyway, just getting started, but I didn't want to make any money for myself as well. It's kind of a counterproductive idea, which I've got past now. The idea was that I'm doing something altruistic. I don't want to make money from it. But I was being I thought I was being a bit of a martyr, not consciously. It's been more of a tomato, really, if you think about it.
Has it been hard trying to gain that businessman mentality whilst trying to do something that is forever giving?
That's been the toughest part for me, yeah, definitely. Because my background is working directly with children, writing for children, working in these different kinds of spaces. I was never a commercial person, never saw myself going into business, and I did see this as a good vehicle to go through. So that's been the biggest challenge. I'm not a for-profit person, but I need to try and be that as much as possible, because with more profit I can do more good.
Absolutely, yeah. What do they say? Save yourself before you save the children. Is that right? Oh no, put your own mask on before you help someone else, right?
Yeah, I've been told advice like that from dozens of people many times. It's starting to come through a little bit. I've been practicing more self-care this year, and I'm able to do more good for other people when I look after myself, so that's great.
Well, look, I mean, how do you encourage a new generation of kids to actually pick up a book? Because, books, from my point of view, are dead. They're old. They take up a lot of space. I understand that there's a lot of aesthetical things with books that people love collecting them and stuff. But if I'm gonna, I listen to books obviously on Audible. But if you're gonna read books a lot, then a lot of people just use Kindles. Why do you want to get kids with a physical copy of a book in their hands?
Well, there's a really big difference between them having an ebook on a Kindle and a physical book. But before I go on to that, just stories in general are incredibly important, and they shape who we are and what we know about ourselves and the world. So that's why I'm in this area. That's why I'm doing this work as an author. And with physical books, that very tangible feeling of having something that you can hold and keep and cherish it feels something very much more which is a part of yourself and part of your life, which you can take around with you, as opposed to something which is a bit of content that might come into your mind and then will then pass through. Like in social media, if you go on YouTube, you can get lots and lots of really great content, but it's essentially something that you're going to pass through and your attention will then go into something else. With a book, you can truly immerse yourself within that.
But listen, you also write these books as well, don't you?
Yes, and I love doing that, yeah.
Yeah, so great. I mean, look, so you're a book author. What do you write about? What's your favourite thing to write about?
Oh, well, the last book that I've written, The Secret Book of I, has been the most interesting one that I've done for me.
The Secret Book of I?
Yes.
Where the hell did you get that name from, man?
Well, what comes to mind if I say that to you?
The Secret Book of I think a little bit more... Secret Book of I, a book about my life and about me.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Is that it?
Well, it's a very open-ended...
How are you going to make a book about me, though? Because only I know what I do.
So I wanted to start off by doing something which was quite universal, that could resonate with all children and all people. So it's a book about a child who believes in a secret book that tells a story of their entire life. So they go on a journey to find this, hoping to discover their destiny. And
Destiny!
I
love a bit of Destiny.
I know, yeah, Destiny's Child.
Yeah. Lord of
the
Rings, I don't know. Anyway.
And I think the idea of what we're doing with our lives and in our future and why we're here on this planet is something that's really important and something we all have to think about. So I thought it'd be nice to do that and make it into a more interesting story where I've got this secret book which everybody has and it's there hidden somewhere and you can find it. And yeah, it's a very tangible thing. There is a book that they do find, but at the same time, it's like, what is I? Like, it's quite a philosophical question. The book is this representation of it, which can be interpreted in many ways, and the secret aspect makes it even more illusory. And
I like it because obviously kids these days are constantly being battered by social media, other influences in their lives, and what you're trying to do essentially is to give them more confidence, more purpose. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. For me, purpose is really important because before I started the prologue, it was something which I didn't have as a constant in my life. And I really struggled in so many different ways, but having that purpose has got me through so much. So I want to help children find whatever purpose they have. And it doesn't have to be anything like mine. It could be having their family, being with their friends, working as a builder, working in a hospital, whatever they want to do. It's fantastic if they love what they're doing.
But how the hell are kids supposed to find out their purpose? I mean, they're living in a world where almost there's too much opportunity and there's not enough focus on maybe trying different things and finding different things. I mean, I personally think that it's almost like paralysis by analysis. It's like, if I could decide what I wanted to do right now, I'd go ahead and do it. But there's so many other things that come into play. And I mean, what sort of, because for me, I always did a lot of different things. So I grew up doing the Army Cadets, I was in a dance company, I was forever reinventing myself and my imaginary future self, to the point where I tried things I didn't like, I failed at things, and then if I really enjoyed it, after the first failure, I would get back up and get back up and get back up. How different is it with the social media aspect that kids are now longing for something that maybe they can't even ever try and be this thing? Do you know what I mean? Is there a big problem with the fact that we grew up literally seeing a very few things that might motivate us, and nowadays there's just everything?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'd like to pick up on is a word that you used, which is something very core to the book, and that's failure. I think failure is something which isn't encouraged enough, and we don't learn from it as much as we actually do, in the terms of we don't acknowledge it within our education social systems. And like you said, with all the things that you've done, they've shaped you as a person, and I'm sure that there are many things that you've taken from all of those. I'm sure there are many things which you're glad to be away from at the moment as well. Like, does anything come to mind that has been useful and something that you
I mean, look, I was in the Army Cadets growing up, so from the age of 12 to 18, I was in this like military role, for kids to learn leadership and adventurous skills and stuff. So all those skills I learned in there has helped me make decisions when being a filmmaker and being able to lead a production company and stuff like that. But I find it's very much about luck. You know, it's lucky that my parents were able to give me a life where I could go out and do these extracurriculum activities outside of school. And I feel like maybe if kids aren't doing enough of the things that they just, you know, want to do, then they're never going to get into the habit of trying something they don't love. And then realizing that they might fail it. You know, it's just giving a kid that sandpit to play in is super, super important. And it just feels like with education and like, you know, the fact these kids have to go through such rigorous SATs and, you know, all these exams that we know exams in this way doesn't fit the majority of people's learning styles. Like, it's, you know, it's proven that
No,
sit down
of course
exams are literally only beneficial for a minority of people.
Yeah, and we don't do that for adults for good reason. I mean, if we were constantly put under that kind of scrutiny, it would be much harder for us to do our jobs. It'd be much more stressful, wouldn't it?
So why the hell is education still like this? Why are we not, you know, creating a new curriculum, a new way of testing people?
We've got a really strong and I think robust system with our education system, and that's great in certain respects, but I think it makes it difficult for change to occur, especially on a more universal level. You see lots of schools with great practices, and that's fantastic, and where you encourage play more when you've got things more based on research. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the problems is that we essentially have an education system that came out of the industrial era, and it's kind of geared us for this more factory kind of process and mentality where we put children through and they're still sat in these rows and columns, and then there's a bell which tells you when you can leave, and it's all very rigorous, and there's not much room for nuance and all these different types of people, like you said. So I think what we need to do is we need to look at the world that we've got today, and then also look at the world that we're going to have in the future, and try to have an education system that can prepare children and young people for the futures that we're going to have, which is going to be very different to what we've got now, and the present that we've got now is really different to what our parents had. But we've not seen that change in the education system, and that's something that we must push for.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I'm not that much of a political person. Like, I'm certainly, I get fired up real quick, man. Like, you know, I love a good debate and everything. But surely the reason why, you know, kids' education isn't standardized in a good quality way is the fact that, you know, rich schools are private schools. Rich areas have private schools. Rich people put their kids in private schools. And therefore, the state schools are in a completely different ballpark, right? It's like there's no point in even trying to understand how we're all as a society supposed to move forward when we're already fragmented.
Yeah.
Like, we've already grown up in different positions, and, you know, private schools invest huge amounts of money in extracurriculum activities, give all their kids an opportunity to be the captain of all sorts of teams and go and explore the world and do that stuff. When you're working with state schools, is there this like just almost desperation where there's not enough time, staff, you know, resources? I mean, what's the differences really?
For me, when I first started working at Caskimore Secondary School, which was my old secondary school, sorry. So yeah, when I started working at Caskimore Secondary School, it was at a time when I'd just left, and there was 16% of people got 5 C's and above.
Bloody hell.
Which is incredibly low. It's amongst the lowest in the country, and that's partly the reason why I was able to get a job as an unqualified maths teacher. Like, I didn't have a PGCE, but they let me come in and work, and you just wouldn't have those standards elsewhere. And I think it worked really well for us. But I think one of the major differences between state schools and private schools is one of the major differences between them, which I don't think is discussed enough, is that with private schools, there is that private investment from parents into their own children's education. Now, people generally want the best for their children. If you're in a position to pay for better education, you will do. And what we have with state schools is that it's funded by the government. And so where's the government's incentive to have great schooling? Now, from an economic perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But it's really difficult when we've got these short terms for a leader to say, I'm going to invest in primary education, which gives the biggest gain, when you might not see the results for quite a few years. And so they don't focus on legacy. They focus on just having like a small impact in a short amount of time. Whereas with private schools, you've got parents who love their children like parents from state schools do.
And
They
are
can
willing to
actually invest in
bankroll
it.
the school to make sure the education's top notch.
Definitely, yeah. But like, if you think of children and young people, like, what stake have they got in society? They've got their parents, some of them, to look after them, and they've got some other people, but they can't vote. So why should the government listen to them? They're not paying taxes, so why should the government listen to them? And they don't hold any positions of power, so why should the government listen to them? That's why we need very strong advocates to speak on their behalf, and that's part of what I aim to do.
Amazing. And is this political? Is it a red versus blue, a left versus right, or are there people from all parties and all people trying to champion a new way of educating kids?
I think for some people they will lean into certain pockets. For me, I make it apolitical when I'm talking about specifics with young people. So I do some empowerment work with 8 to 12-year-olds at this youth zone called Madlow. And they want to create social change. They want to make the world a better place. They want to make Madlow a better place. And now, I would never tell them what my political issues are and what I personally fight for, other than to empower young people. For me, we are often working on things which isn't the number one issue that I would focus on, but it's really not about me, and it would never be red, it would never be blue. When I say that, it will never be them solely. It's always going to be red and blue and everything else. So
I mean, you
me,
can't teach kids politics, right? I mean, like, isn't that just way beyond their thinking? I don't know. Can you? Do kids really understand this?
I don't think it's beyond their thinking, no, not at all. But I think it's beyond my ethics and morals to preach certain political practices to them, or to espouse particular political ideologies.
But is it any wonder that, you know, kids who've gone to private schools might grow up and become a lot more conservative than those who have potentially gone to state schools, who might grow up and become a little bit more, lefty? Is this something that we're already putting these kids through a political jargon at, a young age, just because of the fact that some are privileged and some are not?
I think there is that difference, yeah. And so I think a young person's political views, like a lot of views, are going to be based on what their parents are. And with that private state difference, there is a slight difference or a significant difference between, the number that might be Conservatives and the number that might be Labour. But for me, I try not to focus on that aspect too much, and I look at what children's views are more inherently. And when you can actually have a really good conversation with them, and it does take some work, I think this is why people struggle to engage them a lot, it's because they say, what do you think? And then they might give something very general. And it's because we don't speak to them in the terms that we should be. If we're talking about certain social issues that we care about, and we talk to them in the same way that we might talk to an adult with the language that we might use, it's not going to resonate. At the same time, let's not be condescending to them. We just talk to them in a very frank way, have an open discussion, and see where that leads us. But in terms of people being more left or right leaning, there have been studies to show that as you get older, you tend to become more conservative. And I think that
Will you ever become a conservative, Luke Swann?
I'm not going to rule that out. I mean, at the moment, I wouldn't vote for the Tories, but I'm not going to rule that out as an absolute, because I think that would be a bit too close-minded of me. I don't know what the future holds. It can become very different, and there is a lot of overlap between these two political parties a lot of the time anyway. So there are times when that party might hold more for what I want than another.
You're absolutely right there, and I think this kind of summarises the world we live in now. We live in such we live in a really complicated world. Like, the issues that people chat about and the issues that people care about tend to be super complicated, and we like to simplify them in order to create these tribes, left versus right. And now we live in a world where the internet is just, tells us everything that's going on. You now see that there's incredible members of each party doing incredible things, and there's also terrible members of each party doing terrible things. And so what hope do we have left in picking a side, left or right, when in reality we want a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like a pick and mix? Remember going to a shop, little pick and mix, they don't tell you, you can only have that one or that one. You go, I'll take a bit of that, and are we heading into an AI-driven government one day where we can literally go to the office and we can just tick on policies that we'd like to see implemented, and then that just happens? I think that's a good thing. Maybe we should get your kids to start coding the protocol for AI-driven governments.
There may be some that will be interested in that. So I'm always just backing what they can do and giving them a platform for what they can do.
I love it.
But in terms of my own views, when it comes to that, I think having more nuance between the different ideas between different parties and different groups of people is really important to have. And I think it's a skill that a lot of people lack, just because of who we are as people and our animalistic, instincts.
Ooh, the animalistic instincts coming
Yeah.
out. I love it. Yeah, survivalists, right?
Of course, yeah. And there was a time when it was really good to have a bias against other groups of people. I'm not talking in any like modern human history, but earlier on, evolutionarily speaking, there was a benefit to be able to identify with your group and then see another tribe who were likely to hurt you. Now, we've got quite similar minds, very, very similar minds actually, yet we're in a completely different world. And I think people are still operating in those ways where we do see people as different. We see them as threats, and we see them as being completely wrong, and everything we say is right, everything they say
This
is
has
wrong.
got something to do with social media, though, right? I mean, the thing is like, I heard a group of kids the other day acting as if they were like gangsters, man, and these kids must have been about 11, 12 years old, and I'm a bit like, even with the social media impact, you're still a little prick. And I'm like, at what point does especially young boys, what point do young boys go out of that, that thuggery kind of mindset and grow into, productive members of society, if they ever do,
Many don't. And
Why is
that's
that,
a real
though?
struggle. I think it's because there are quite set paths that we've got set out for people in society. Now, if we look at a very different example, if you consider someone who is very socially and economically privileged, you would say that they've got these incredible options to do everything that they want. And they do have more options to do what they want than children who are in poverty have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you consider like people who go to like Eton, for example, if you go
Eton,
through,
darling.
yeah, if you go through that system and you've got parents who have maybe been there themselves, there's a lot of pressure. You're going to go to a certain school, you're going to go to Eton, you're going to go to Oxbridge, you're then going to do PPE or something else. And if you look at even the people who we think have got the most freedom, I don't think they're actually that free. So when you look at more oppressed groups of people, like people in poverty, and you see there's even less chance of that, the options are quite limited. But I think they're not limited, they just appear to be limited.
But how do people break out of that revolving door? Like, how do people really change their stars? Because if you've come from a background where you've never even understood, first of all, that failure is important, because maybe you come from a family who are really tight on you. How the hell is someone supposed to just like wake up, overnight and just kind of do something they wouldn't normally do?
It's not easy. So like I said, I come from Oldham, and I grew up with just my mum for a while as a single parent, and she did a great job doing that. And she didn't finish her GCSEs, and after school I went to sixth form and then did some work teaching, and then I went off to Cambridge, and I was the first in my school's 40-year history to attend Oxbridge.
Wow.
And it's really, really telling for how unlikely that is. Now, for me, it's really difficult when I try to look at my own life and see, are there things that I can take from that? And there's a very, very strong support that I had from my mum, which made a massive difference, and telling me that I can do everything. I wouldn't say that to young people now. I'd say that you have the opportunity to do everything, and then there's a lot of hard work that needs
But
to go
there's
into it
something
as well.
that your own family members can do for you that teachers can't, right? Teachers are so bound by political correctness and, ways to engage with children that sometimes it can be your family members who inspire you the most.
Oh yeah, definitely. For many people, their greatest hero is their mum or their dad, for example.
But obviously, so you grew up without your father in your life, and did that, or how do you think that impacted you growing up?
It impacted my self-esteem and my mental health. Like I had, and to a lesser degree still have, a strong sense of like fear of rejection and abandonment, and just wanted to be liked a lot and wanted to be close to people and felt like they were always going to leave me. So it has a really, really strong impact, and this is what a lot of children go through as quite the norm in many
But
places.
did you have a strong sort of male role model in your life growing up, whether it was from school or from anywhere else?
No, I never had that. I think for myself, because my siblings were 7 to 13 years younger than me, I felt the need to
Wow.
really step up and do what I could for them. And they had a dad who passed away a couple of years ago, but yeah, I really wanted to try and step in and do whatever I could to help them in those respects. So, what I think for children and young people growing up generally is that just there is so much opportunity to try things, but you can't really see this opportunity a lot of the times. If you say to a young person or child, or even an adult, what is it you can do, what is it you want to do, it's very limited. So because I work with empowerment, I've done lots of research into that, and I work with young people and develop the theories that other people have come up with to see what's a bit more realistic to the settings that I'm in. And there are, roughly speaking, two important aspects to empowerment. One is agency, a sense of I can do this, and that's self-belief, self-confidence, self-efficacy. And the other one is opportunity structures. And it may seem, and it is indeed the case, that certain children have greater opportunity structures. But what I do is when I work with them and I say, what do you want to do? Like, there's this little model that I have called Beyond Aspiring. And it's not just about increasing aspirations, but it's about them actually doing these things as a young person. So,
Wow.
as an example, go on. So when you were younger, what did you want to be?
I wanted to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Brilliant.
I wanted sheer power, my friend.
Yeah.
I think I'd watched Iron Man a few too many times, the cartoon series. I figured if Iron Man was Prime Minister, that would be great for everyone.
Yeah, so we had a Cameron Prime Minister, didn't we? But
We did,
not,
we did.
not the one
That
that
made
you
me
wanted.
famous
Yeah,
for
of
a
course,
while.
yeah. All right then. So if I was working with, let's say you're 8 years old, for example, and you say, I want to be the Prime Minister of, I'll first of all say that that's a really great thing that you want to do, and it's something which is achievable. It's very unlikely that you can actually get to that position, but the world isn't all or nothing. It's not a case of I can be the Prime Minister or I do nothing.
So you're not quite shooting me down, you're not quite building me up, but you're telling me realistically that it might not be achievable.
What you want in its entirety is unlikely to be achievable, but let's look at the
Interesting.
reasons why you want to do that. So why do you want to be the Prime Minister?
So I think I would be a great Prime Minister because I'd give everybody a day off. This is my 8-year-old thinking.
Yeah.
Everyone a day off.
I'm sure it's your current thinking as well.
It is kind of, yeah. Working week is now 4 days a week.
Great.
Basic income. I didn't know about that back then. But sweeties for everyone for free, right? I had a lot of burning ambitions to give to people. So I wanted to give growing up.
Okay then, so what we would do is we would say, rather than in the distant future, let's look at the prospect of you being the Prime Minister. Let's create a sort of smaller version of that now. So we go from that aspiration to making something which is a realization, something which is a bit more realistic. So what we could do is we could set up like a class parliament for you and for you,
Ooh,
Cameron.
I like the sound of
Potentially.
this.
I think to make it more realistic, we can see if there are some other young people that would like to be the Prime Minister.
You want to debate me? Is that it? Is that it? Little Timmy wants to debate me?
Little Timmy might want to debate you, and so let's
Jesus.
give Timmy that opportunity as well. So you, little Timmy, you can run for election, and then my position as with the prologue would be to give you some of the tools that you need to set up this parliament yourselves.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and then you can run, you can create posters. And what I would do is I'd look at that opportunity structure, like I said, and I'd say, right, look at everything that you have in this classroom. Every person in here is someone who could potentially help you out with.
Give me your vote. Give me your vote. Yeah. Vote for me.
Be part of my party. Like if you want to, if
Yeah.
you want to do something policy, if you want to create a poster, if you want to choose which sweets people want, you can go out and find the sweets, and then you can look at people's parents and say, well, is anyone working in the council? Have you got some tips for me? You've got the teacher, you've got us, you've got all
I
these
want all
organisations.
kids to have mandatory sweet rations every day. It's like 2 packets of Haribo a day.
the difficult thing is with me not imposing my will, I couldn't.
You couldn't
force
tell me
I
no.
couldn't tell you not to do that.
So
But
what if I
could-
wanted to go full fascist? Like, would you be able to calm me down if I was like, let's segregate all of the children, based on their race? Would that be? I mean, look, let's play real. There's some things that kids just can't comprehend, about things like that. But I do like the approach, right?
Do you know George Orwell actually he said I can't remember exactly.
Mr. 1984.
That's the one, yeah.
Oh.
He said something about
I don't think I've ever read that book before, but I know that George Orwell was a bit of a future thinker, and so what does he say in regard to this?
Oh, he's a brilliant person. He's actually was a big influence.
Was a brilliant person.
Yes.
Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, his ideas still do exist. There's actually some of the ideas from 1984 that are in The Secret Book of I. So yeah, there's this idea when children they go through to this black and white room and all the colour from everything fades away. And that's when their thinking comes really restrictive. Everything's black and white, all or nothing, good or bad, right or wrong, which the world isn't like that. The world's like a colourful spectrum, isn't it, in terms of ideas and thinking. So when they go in there, it's this really restrictive environment, and there are actually eyes on the walls which are watching them.
God.
And it's kind of satire of the education system, but it's also this idea of like just children being surveyed in that sense and being put under all that scrutiny. But he said that I think it was something like bullying as a form of fascism. And I found that really interesting. I looked into it a little bit, and I don't agree with it 100%, but there's so many similarities.
But it kind of is, isn't it? I used to do a bit of work in a school, and I actually there's one time that I saw a kid laughing at another kid with all his friends, and you quite see he was getting bullied. And next thing you know, this kid that was getting bullied jumps up from his chair, lobs his chair across the table, and just runs out. And the teacher that I was with, actually went out after the kid, and I took it upon myself to say to this kid who was, the bully, I said, come here, stand in front of class and tell the class what it is you did to cause that reaction. And this kid just started like shaking and trembling, and you could see the tears boiling up in his eyes. And I was like, right, sit down. You know?
That's not quite the approach I would have taken.
Exactly.
I can see why you did
dude,
it.
I got called into the head teacher's office, the next time I was there, and so I heard that you brought him up in front of the class, and it really embarrassed him. And actually, his mum works at this school, so she's not going to be very happy. I think she wants to talk to you. And of course, I'm from a background where you speak about the problems, right? You address them head on. So I wasn't trained to figure out how to get this kid from doing it. And anyway, long story short, this kid would not talk to me again. I went and taught in that class again. He didn't even look at me. He'd walk around the school just not looking at me at all. And so I went up to him and I said to him, listen, I'm really, really sorry for the way I treated you at that class. It was really wrong of me. I know I should have done that. And next thing you know, he was like, oh, cool Cam. Now me and Cam are best friends, So, making that apology to him was important. But it seems like there's, I don't know, man, like if you bully a kid and you get called up from it and you have to stand in front of the class, isn't that going to help you consider whether or not it's good to bully a kid next time?
I think in certain respects, yes. So I think you were really well intentioned. And
I tried.
You did try, and I think you did a good job in some respects. I think if you consider the biggest fear that people have in the world is public speaking, and I think to be brought up in front of the entire class and to be questioned like that on the spot might have been overwhelming.
Bit too intense.
Yeah, a bit too intense. Especially if you're considering like why is this young person a bully in this instance? Has there been something that's gone on at home? Is there any case of domestic abuse? I mean, these are some of the indicators that could lead to that. And often a child might not know why they are bullying. But I think that I don't think that this should be just pushed under the table and ignored. I think that it should be addressed, and there should be a dialogue with that young person so that they can be more accountable. I just don't think being at the front of the class in front of everyone is the right setting for that. Because
I don't know, man. There's I'm very much aware that there is a standardized way of talking to kids that teachers have to follow, but the school of hard knocks is a real thing, which actually, a lot of teachers who, have this strong character about them. I remember
Yeah.
these teachers at school used to like bang their hand on the counter or something. That would be that's all they have to do. Some teachers have to do this, some teachers have to do that. Don't all teachers have a different way of disciplining students, or is there supposed to be one kind of structure to this?
Very interesting question. And I think it's a difficult one. I don't feel like there should be an authority on how teachers as a whole treat young people. I think one thing that's really important to consider is when we're talking about these things, we're coming into like ideas of like discipline and other areas like that, which are very important within a school, but which I think are the primary role of the caregivers. And I think it's important that we don't take away too much from parents and allow them to like discipline and teach their children in their own ways, unless it becomes abusive. And I think
But abusive, right? I mean, so you can't spank a kid anymore, right?
yeah,
You can't touch a kid. I remember once being pulled up by my dad, and I don't know, is it not something that is still needed, sometimes to give a kid some physical, not abuse, never abuse, but some just to show them that this is physically not right. Is that gone now?
I think it depends what we want in society. But yeah, spanking.
I believe that is a fire alarm of some sort.
Yeah, I think the alarm bells have been ringing.
Is it?
Yeah,
Is it time to leave? God, I'm so sorry about that, listeners of the podcast. That is just what happens when you find a public space to go and chat about. Well, look, let's
use that as a metaphor for what is going on in a lot of people's minds when we talk about issues like this. Like, it's a very sensitive one. I think one of the ways in which we can look at issues is to look at whether we would treat different groups of people like that, and look at what is underlying in those methods that we're using to teach. So if we're teaching that with a, not necessarily, I'll describe it as violence, some people wouldn't, with a, like, say, a tap on the bum is the lightest way to put it.
A tap on the bum.
Yeah, whether like a slap or wherever it is. We're doing that to modify a young person's behaviour. Now, is it acceptable for us to do that as adults? Do we consider that a good way to teach people, or are we a bit more developed in our ways of getting people to get on board with what we want to do and change their behaviour?
Jesus.
That's people who disagree with me now.
Jesus, this is a real thing going on. Look, I think the issue of do you spank kids or not is such a hard one to talk about, because it's like, well, what has the kid done to deserve that? And I do remember back in school there was a certain friend of mine who got beaten up by his dad because he got a yellow card in his football match that his dad had to pay a little fine.
Wow.
And that fucked him up for life, man. Like,
Yeah,
genuinely,
I'm not surprised.
and then there's other people like myself who got suspended like 7 times and never got physically abused by my parents at all. I mean, I was certainly punished, but and each time the punishments got more kind of severe and scary, right? But they never actually hit me. And I think this is tough. I mean, what are we supposed to do about this, man? Are parents supposed to get like a punishment pack sent to their house, like when your kid reaches a certain age, saying what you can and can't do?
Well, I think parents deserve a lot more support anyway. So there are lots of methods to like help raise young people, and I think that with the research that we've had, and with the way that we're going as a society and the way that we want to treat people, like physically hitting children is something that we're kind of moving away from. So there are loads of ways in which we can reason with like young people, and I think parents having that authority as well. I mean, if we look back, it wasn't that long ago when teachers were allowed to hit children.
They were. I remember my parents telling me stories about at school getting hit by their teachers, and yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I think one of the problems is, once you allow something to exist, it then exists on a vast spectrum. So you have, say, for example, from maybe like someone having a slap which doesn't really hurt them, but it's a reminder that they've done something wrong, they don't do it again, all the way to the worst kind of like physical abuse that you can imagine. And it's really difficult to say to what degree, in what circumstance, by what person, at what age can you do that. I think it's much easier to say that let's move beyond this physical violence or physical repercussions, and work more at getting young people to engage and taking away their Wi-Fi as well if we need to.
Taking away their Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
That's such a good punishment, isn't it?
It's painful. It's painful.
Oh, that's a really good punishment. So look, I mean, you obviously work a lot in schools and with teachers and parents, and so what would your tips be to a parent who's currently struggling with a teenager or someone in a primary school who's just not listening to them?
Listen to them. So when I say listen to them, I mean listen to the young person, listen to the child. It's really hard for them to articulate what's going on.
I mean, are they
sometimes.
supposed to ask questions? Okay, so let's say your kids just come home from school and they've been bullying someone. How is a parent supposed to deal with that without just, punishing them?
I would take a lot of different approaches, and one of them would come under essentially punishment. I wouldn't just allow my child to bully and hurt another child and then just say, oh, I'm just going to have a discussion with them and reason with them and understand how they're feeling. No, there are very strong repercussions for doing these things. It's not acceptable whatsoever. And so I'd take a strong tone in that sense without being aggressive, and I would be very firm, and I'd put in place certain boundaries and take away some of the things that they have.
Like Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi could be one of them, yeah. They could be grounded.
But then
I'll take a kind of hard approach and a soft approach at the same time. So I'll do those things and I'll be very firm and make them know that this is something that cannot be accepted. But then at the same time, I'll try to get an understanding of the reasons why they did that so that we can prevent this from happening in the future. So it's not saying that it's acceptable to do it and we're just going to say, like, wishy-washily, like, how are you feeling? That becomes a part of it. But there's also that stronger part where you are putting into place certain boundaries. And I think really it's difficult to get from children what's really going on in their head, because it's so hard to articulate how we're feeling and why that's affecting our emotions, even as adults. So it's a greater task for children. And I think equipping parents and teachers with those methods, which we are starting to do more and more within schools and within the social services, so that they are more equipped to deal with these things.
You're absolutely right, man. Look, I mean, the whole pie is so big when it comes down to education and nurturing and kids in general. God forbid the day I have my own children. A lot of people say that parents will fuck up their kids. But they can equally, do great things for their kids, right? And I think this is why it's really tough to say there is one standard of raising a kid, one method of raising a kid.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Isn't this the tough thing, though, when it comes down to anything that tries to scale? Methodology that scales is unfortunately going to lack the context of the person, the family, the background, whatever, and that's ultimately why I think education's always been tough. You are right that the education system has literally not changed since the factory owners decided to remove certain lines in nursery rhymes and fairy
I'm talking
tales.
in terms of some fundamental components of it, but there has been a lot of change, just not as much change as I'd like.
I see. So, but getting that change into schools, now that academies have started to pop up, does that present a different challenge for schools from a bureaucracy level? Are they no longer accountable by the government? I mean, do you know much about academies?
Yeah, a little bit. So the school that I was working at Caskinmore became an academy. And I saw some of the changes that occurred within that school through that process. And I've since worked with some academies and with some more traditional state schools. For me, I think that we need to try and obviously create change, but I always try to learn from these things as much as possible. I think something that would be interesting to explore in the future is looking at schools which are where there's ownership by the people who invested in them. So if there's something that is a part of you and a part of yours, then you're more willing to engage with it and you want it to succeed. So I think without introducing money and stuff into the equation, I think that if we had government-run schools where the members of the schools had some stronger sense of investment in that, and again, not monetary investment, that they could have a say in how these schools are run and how they move forward, I think that will present an interesting opportunity. But there are then loads of great organisations such as the Education Endowment Foundation who do brilliant research onto different methodologies and different ways of teaching. And I think that there's a big disparity between what the research says, which is really good and strong, and what's actually put into practice. And so we need to bridge that gap a little bit more as well as we're going forward.
That makes sense, man. And I guess the hardest thing is to be able to keep up with what they need to be teaching kids. You know, I always feel like our education is like 10 years old. Even if you go to university, you know, and you studied marketing, you're screwed now, you know, honestly, because SEO days are gone. And in the same way, preparing kids for the world that they're to grow up in is tough when the people that write the curriculum are not growing up in this day right now. And so I've done a bit of teaching in schools, and when I was teaching filmmaking, social media, photography, content creation, basically, it was so easy for these kids to actually understand how to pick up a camera, how to, you know, write a few story beats on a script and then go and shoot that. And then how to upload it online. But the teachers themselves were so far away from that process that it's not a surprise that kids are finding it stressful on their mental health to engage with people online, because they get taught such old, archaic methods to communicating with people that when it comes down to scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, they've just not been given any barriers. I mean, what are kids supposed to do in order to learn how to use social media?
So taking what you said in a more broader sense, I think you picked up on something that's really important, and that's the ways in which children and young people are able to think and learn better than adults on average. Like, there are things which adults have more, so we have more experience, which might have more wisdom. That experience might also, it makes our brains more rigid. It might make us have a
Yeah, but have you ever seen
of...
like an old person on Facebook, man? Like, you know, they scroll at a very slow pace. You know, it's almost a completely different mindset now. That, you know, this is why the rise of short form content platforms like Vine and now TikTok is so goddamn popular with the kids, because they want to just flick, next thing, flick, next thing, flick, next thing. Older people get stuck up on individual posts, man. They literally will like look at the same post for like 20 minutes, then construct a well-constructed comment.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, that's not how we comment on social media. Do you know what I mean? Trolling isn't something done by old people. Because if it is, I'll be very impressed, you know, because some of these trolls can't even spell or, you know, read properly. You know, it's people that just want to, like, you know, give a quick little this. But kids that go and read these comments are now in the game, the business of thinking, you know, oh, have I done something wrong? Like, did they not like that picture of me? You know, and I feel like the fundamental differences in mindset between older people and younger people mean that social media is just not being taught, not even just correctly, but being taught at all. I remember a song we used to sing, right? It was like, before you click, 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 you need to think, and tell someone. And this song was supposed to like encourage kids that before they click on a post or click on a link, they should go and tell someone.
Yeah.
That's the most ridiculous like feedback. You know, here's a suggestion, kids. Anytime you're feeling scared on social media or don't know what to do, just go and tell someone. Like, that would happen about 50,000 times a week in one person's household, because hell, you scrolling through Instagram, like, what you're supposed to tell them about everything. There is just not enough understanding of this world, and I think that's down to trying to, you know, keep it away from them, right? You know, it's like if you keep this away from them into the age that they should be using it, and suddenly it's like, bam, there's a load of, you know, pressures on you, there's a load of insecurities, you know, you're now thinking that the world that you see online is real, and you've not been brought up enough, A, to either participate in the social media world in a way that isn't being fake yourself, but B, not understanding that the people online are literally doing this as a business, and therefore, you know, we have to understand this as advertising.
Yeah, of course.
And kids never understand what advertising is. However, you know, the modern day advertising is through people. You know, so it's now not even just about like, oh, you know, there's a Coca-Cola's, you know, coming into our school and offering us book coupons. It's literally like Timmy is playing Fortnite professionally at the age of like 14 and living the high life, but actually Timmy's not doing that at all. He's just one of the many thousands of kids that these people employ to, you know, it's just, this whole world needs breaking down. It needs you know, like, you need to get social media experts in to write a curriculum around social media, something that we can take into schools and then say, once a week, we're going to sit down and have 20 minutes of social media time where the kids can play on social media, learn about social media. And the problem is they're going to see some shit that they don't want to see, you know, and that's the thing about the internet, is that you can't unsee what you've seen on the internet.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? Despite how much, you know, rules and algorithms they put in place to protect people, you're going to have to expose yourself to these things at some point.
Definitely, yeah. And a few things to pick up on with what you said. I think, first of all, we need to play to our advantages. Children, young people, very adept on social media, and the way that they use it, we can gain a lot from that if we actually engage with them and learn from them and get them involved in some of the processes around the way that social media is structured. But in terms of what you said after that, I think that's really important as well. What we tend to do, what a lot of people tend to do, is that we see something bad and then we try to shield children from it. But this just can't happen. Like, I've got a cousin who's 8, and there've been some really, really difficult things that he's like actually gone through recently, and it's like his awareness of what's going on is very, very great. Like, they're not stupid. Like, they know
they're
about
not
these
stupid
things.
at all, are they?
But what we try to do is, and it's well intentioned, but
Yeah.
we try to keep them away from it, like you said. But when what then happens is, then when they do engage with it, they're less informed. Like, we do similar things when it comes to how we teach about drugs or how we teach about sex and relationships in schools. There are some people who just try not to have those conversations because they think if we have the conversation with them, then they're going to know about drugs and
They're gonna
sex,
go and
and
do
they're
it.
going to be going doing it.
Sniffing glue next time I see them. That's it, right?
It's like a lot of them are going to do it
Wow.
anyway, and it's like, do we want them to be informed when they're choosing whether to do these things, and if they do choose, how they choose to engage with them, or do we just want to avoid it completely and let them go and learn it for themselves or learn from their peers who might not be as informed as you are as an adult? So yeah, I think something like that would be incredibly important, especially considering how important social media is now. And it's a way for people to express themselves. It's a way in which people are compared to other people tremendously, affects their well-being and mental health so much. So it would make sense to have some experts to go in and just to show them, right, look, this is the reality of what you're watching. Like, it's a lot easier with TV. With TV, you watch it, and obviously reality TV came in, and I think what's happening on social media is part of that same movement.
I mean, look,
isn't
people
it?
still believe reality TV, man. Like, whenever they watch Love Island or Real Housewives, everyone's like, oh my God, you know, this. That's all scripted. You know, people like myself, you know,
Yeah.
storytellers will sit down and say, right, what crazy shit can we get these people to do today?
But there are
And
some real elements and many elements which
the
are
real
fiction.
elements of the people. You know,
Yeah.
the people are real as they can get. You know, they are real. They are real individuals. The storylines and, you know, the problems that they encounter aren't necessarily real. And, of course, because we all fascinate so much about it. I mean, look, this has gone back years and years and years. I think this is why public lynchings probably first became really popular, because we love to gather around one social issue and talk about it a lot. So things like Love Island is literally like the modern day version of executions, on the simple basis that we all want to know what's going on, right? And then we like to talk about it, right? And so, you know, you watch Love Island as a kid. Wow, what a fucked up view of the world you're going to have now. And if your parents are into Love Island, suddenly you're going to be in this weird place where, like, I mean, how are kids supposed to have a relationship when it's all based on these weird flirtatious games and one night stands and you know, relationships that are built upon, you know, the looks and the things they're wearing instead of actually the things that are important in relationships, which of course is, you know, I mean, who knows? Who knows? Do we have to teach what love is? Do we have to teach kids what love is?
I don't think we know it well enough to teach it well, but we can do our best in doing a little bit of that. I think, like, with what you said, I think that educating young people in a more universal way is really important. So we cover some of the intellectual aspects in school with the academic subjects that we do. I don't think we do that well enough. There are things which have really, really great effects, like metacognition or higher order thinking. So thinking about thinking and, like, being aware
Now, thinking
of
about thinking, now that's an interesting idea, because I have a friend of mine who is a memory champion, right?
Okay.
So learns how to learn. And when I first heard about this, I was just like, shit. Like, if you don't know how to learn, and retain that information, then pretty much every book you've ever read has just kind of gone in one ear and out the other. And it's fascinating, honestly, because he practices methods based on, you know, these sort of brain training type things where every day he'll try and remember the same things, blah, 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 blah. And I think the way he does it is he associates with images, right? So images become the words, and then the meanings are etched into his mind in images. And I think he does something called like a memory palace or something, which is where you create like every location you go to. So we're here in B-Works right now, and what I'd do is I'd walk around B-Works and I'd see that they have a little pool table over here, they have a little projector over there, they have the coffee machine up there.
Funny man in a corner.
Exactly, yeah. Where people are located. And I would associate a book that I've read, the information in that book, putting it into places. So if I read a book and it's told me about running a company, I might think, oh, okay, that would be the coffee machine, and it'll be about someone making the coffee. And so when you say to me, Cam, what's the best thing about running a company, or the most important thing, I would then physically in my mind walk into the front of B-Works, walk down the stairs to the coffee machine, and there, when I look at the coffee machine, would be that vital information about running a team in the company.
Yeah, of course. And these tactics and techniques can be really useful. But like metacognition, like more broadly speaking, it employs things like that, and it just teaches us the way in which our brains work. So it means
kids
that
aren't being taught how to retain information, right? I mean, they're not.
It's not just about retaining information. There's so much data and information that's coming towards us, and we take on board so much knowledge. But it's like once we do that, it's like what cognitive biases are they? Like, have we got a certain bias if someone tells us something? Like, for example, going back to the political ideas, if someone from our political team or from our football team does something or says something, we're more likely to believe that that's true. Now, it's really important for us to be aware of that, so we know that we're going to have these biases in how we interpret information. And there are many other ones as well, which just tell us about. There's actually Daniel Kahneman. He is a psychologist, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics, even though his work is in psychology, because of his work on these like decision making and these cognitive biases that we have. So he looked at all the different ones that we have and looked at all the ways in which our brains don't process information in the way that we think, and like in the way that we might have like all or nothing thinking. These are really, really important ideas, and what they do is they structure the way we think about anything. So for any piece of information or content that we bring in, we can literally look at the ways in which we're interpreting that information, and we can see if it's likely to be true, or if it's likely to be false, or to what degree it's likely to be true, and to understand the sources of these things. So that's the intellectual development that I think we should focus on.
That's very intellectual, man.
But then there's also social, so learning about how society operates and how we're a part of that and doing things for one another. There's emotional and psychological intelligence, which is really about building up our resilience and then resolving issues that might develop into mental health problems. And then there's practical intelligence as well, both practical in the sense of how do we do this with our taxes, and how do we do that with something else.
Well, that's not being taught in schools, is it?
Yeah, or how we build, how we do things with our hand, like how we want to do things around the house. And it's like we focus very specifically on a few topics, and even those topics we focus on like STEM and English, which is really good, but we don't focus too much on like creative areas. And what's really interesting, there was something at the World Economic Forum, and they were essentially talking about with artificial intelligence and with the roles that are becoming automated and which we won't need humans for. Like, this is already happening, but it's going to happen to a greater degree, isn't it?
Yeah, Skynet, right? This is where the robots take over, right?
Yeah, and so in 20, 25 years' time, think of all the roles that are going to be taken up by AI, and then consider what is that AI not going to be able to do, which we as humans can do. And I think some of the things that come to mind, first of all, are our ability to be creative and to develop new ideas.
So you're telling me that artists are actually going to be more valuable than bankers?
Artists are going to be more valued than they are now in the future. I'll say that for sure. And also some of the more human elements about empathy and those kind of things. They're stuff that AI isn't going to be able to do like we can.
Hey, I don't know, man. There's some really intelligent AI out there. I mean, like, part of me almost wants our world to be controlled by these robots, because the way I see it, and I've worked a bit in blockchain technology, for which there's an incredible concept called a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization.
Okay.
This is pretty much what we're talking about with AI. It's like creating a company that buys, trades, and sells like a normal company, but no one exists in it. All it is computer programs written in order to take care of the thing it takes care of. Now,
What objectives does that have?
well, the objective is to create full autonomy, transparency, trust. If the rainforest had its own DAO that was essentially giving it the self-sovereignty to protect itself using whatever resources it had available, whatever funds it had available, it wouldn't be burning at a massive rate right now, right? So, to say that robots taking over might be detrimental for humans might be a slight oversight on our part, considering we're the people that program them. Now, obviously, if that AI decided that actually the best thing was for no humans to exist, then of course, we're going to have to go through some fundamental laws of robotics.
I think that's the first place that people go to when they think of the future of
That's
AI.
the movies, right, man?
Yeah, they think of AI taking over in that respect of taking over the human race.
Yeah.
Now, I think what's more likely is something that you've described, but when you say it's created by people, it's created by specific people who have a specific amount of power and resources. And so they're going to, presumably, if they're like many humans, they're going to design that in ways which are beneficial to them and to others.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's where the problem is. I think the problem is still a human problem. It's in the way that we are using these technologies. But I don't necessarily think that the biggest threat is from that technology taking over us so much, but it's as certain people within society creating this technology to serve their own ends. Like if you consider with politics, and you mentioned with elections before, and the artificial intelligence with regards to that, it's progressively coming in more and more, and AI and these companies are more and more being able to understand people. And what we have is a point where they might understand us in some ways better than we understand ourselves. So based on what we've clicked on and all of these things, it's put all of this data
And
together.
they're listening.
They're listening.
It's official, folks.
And then they can put forward something which we like, and we might not have even known that we liked that before. But as we go on, we're going to understand ourselves less relative to the way companies can understand ourselves, and that's quite scary. So I think beginning to understand ourselves, what our values are, what we want from life, and what we want to do in this life as well, and what we care about. I think if we can get to understand those aspects ourselves, then we can counter some of the problems that I think will come with AI.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's one thing that I've learned about any kind of computer stuff, and that is, you're absolutely right. It depends who's making it, what the incentive is. The thing that I kind of take a lot of time thinking about is what happens if, so Switzerland has one of the best democratic processes in the world, not because it works super efficiently, but like genuinely they get to vote on everything, right? They're told about everything. We don't get that opportunity here, and I don't think necessarily want to know about everything, but if there was a way to create a system that essentially understood the backgrounds and the incentives for everyone in the country, i.e. these people are more conservative leaning, these people are more liberal, these people are more like Labour, then using an AI algorithm, we could almost create the perfect set of problem statements that we could address. So we could say, okay, here's 3 problems that need to be addressed for conservative leaning people. Here's 3 problems that need to be addressed for Labour thinking people. And then we all get to kind of vote on the policies, not the parties. And therefore we've used, AI driven data to fix problems that we all could benefit from. And I think that's the fundamental thing about politics, is that you're asking me to pick a side, left, right. And I don't know. Sometimes when I'm running my business, I do want, tax, incentives to do certain things. And, when I'm seeing homeless people on the street, I would like to raise the standard, the poverty line and be above it, right?
From both
I
groups.
don't think any rich person running a business wouldn't agree that homelessness should be addressed. I think it's just that they have other issues that they want to address first, like Brexit and all this other business-related stuff. But we don't get given the option to address all of these issues. It's not like a pick and mix. It really is like you eat this meal or this meal. And I don't think that's going to be the future.
Yeah, well, that's the option we have within the voting system within our democracy. I think that a lot of the change that we can do comes outside of voting on election day, because it is so limited in those ways. And that's why, if you're interested in reducing taxes for the rich, people can go and lobby for that. If you're interested in helping homeless people like yourself and I might, there are charities that we can do. We can do things ourselves, so we can help in many ways. But yeah, I think what you said in terms of future systems, on the surface, I think that they would be more productive, where we can look at these like policies in these different ways. But I think again we're going to fall into some issues, and there's some issues that are going to be unpredictable. So it's one of those like you have to be mindful of the things that you don't know, and to introduce a system like that, I think would work better in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure the ways in which it wouldn't. So it'd be good to really trial these things out and do some tests in controlled environments. And
well, we
some
know what
simulations.
happens when you try shit out with on a big scale with a population of people ill-informed. You know, you get division, right? And I think this is the problem. Going all the way back to like Julius Caesar, you know, people always assume that Rome was this kind of like, you know, huge empire that just kept, you know, getting wealthier and everyone's lives got better and better. It was so archaic, man. Like the legionnaires, the people in charge of these armies, would literally march into Rome and fucking chop off the Caesar's head, and then they're the new Caesar. So it's like even within the Roman Empire, there was huge, you know, conflicts and issues, and of course, this is going back, you know.
You have to value our system when we look at that, don't you?
Bloody straight we do need to. And, you know, sometimes I look at the House of Commons and stuff when they're, like, arguing and they sound like a bunch of... Hey, they don't sound like school children. I have to tell you, like...
School children are not allowed to behave like that.
They're not allowed to behave like that?
No. Like that, if that sort of behaviour was... If I saw that behaviour in a classroom, I would be really unimpressed with the young people and with the adult who's moderating them and working with them, because... It is totally unacceptable. And
it's unbelievable. I can't believe that they're even allowed to shout at each other from across the room. Boo, cheer, and all this stuff. And there's an order. The right honourable gentleman needs to be heard. And you're like, guys, like, this is so archaic. And we need to kind of figure out how to teach them that it's not acceptable to speak over someone else. Period, full stop. Like you do in a school, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like, what would you do if kids started just shouting at each other like that across the room?
Well, we've had that. So when I work with the Mini Madlows, they actually want to get together every week and have a board meeting, which, because of the work that we're doing around, they're always really interested to do that. And we've set up some rules within that. I wanted them to set up the rules if they wanted to, and they did. So they set up certain rules, like you can't talk over each people. It's really nice, actually. What we developed in the end was, it was like 3 strikes, and then you're out, which is a very common thing. So then, when someone did something, which was they were constantly talking over someone else when they were trying to express themselves, and then so some of the other young people looked at me and said, "Is that a strike?" I said, "Well, I don't think it should be for me to decide whether it's a strike or not."
As well.
So what we decided was we decided we'd have a democratic aspect to that. So if someone speaks over somebody else, if they think that it's a strike, they'll say strike, and then there's a quick, people put their hands up if you think it's a vote. And there've been cases where, quick cases where there've been a strike, and then they've put their hand up, and I've kept my hand down because I didn't think it was much of an issue.
Well, so you are the overarching, you know, the overseer of this.
No.
It's more like a dictatorship.
No, it's
like North Korea.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, it's a democracy, and
interesting.
Yeah, there've been many times when I've voted for a particular way, and that's not been the way that the outcome has been, and that's because more people have voted for it.
But do you think that would work in the House of Commons? Because they'd all just say strike all the time, right?
Well, they'd all just get the party whip would tell everyone from one side to put their hand up, and then you're going to pretty much get that voting. For me, I think that like I don't want children and young people to engage with these things if they don't want to. It's important that they can enjoy their childhood and play and socialise and develop as people in nice, fun ways. But there are lots of young people and children who want to get involved with these things. So for me, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to enable all these young people to get together and essentially create some of their own systems with their own rules, and they can learn from times when we've made mistakes, and they can develop their systems in different ways. They can then operate within those manners, and then as they're growing up to say that they can make a change in the world. They can do the things that they care about. They can cooperate with people and agree with people who have different views to them. And then as they grow up, like, either they're just people in the street who are nicer people and more considerate, or if they're the ones who have political ambitions and they go into politics, then they're hopefully going to take some of those values which they had as children into their adult lives and their adult careers. So for me, it's all about children of the present, and I focus on that more than I focus on what's happening in the adult systems, although I do learn a lot from the adult systems.
Well, I think that's interesting, Luke, because thank God you are working with kids these days, because I think they'd be very, very lucky to have you teaching them, your values. And I think that's what all teachers do, really, is that they not impose values on kids, but they share with them, and you've got some seriously good values. So
it's the balance is really difficult as well with that. Like, I have to constantly question myself and test my assumptions and get rid of them, because I might go in, when I first started working there, I'd go in with certain assumptions for how things would want to be, and that just wasn't the case. So you need to be a very active listener and let them direct some of the things which are really important to them, and take a more organic approach to empowerment. And I guess that's what I've developed with them, and then we then have a dialogue, and then we can work with things together. But then when it comes to something like safeguarding issues, then I would take the authority. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's really important that an adult can do that, because they're not responsible to do that, and it's not their duty, and it shouldn't be. But I think it's about engaging with them and giving them an opportunity to express themselves, talk about it in a deeper manner, talk about it amongst each other, and actually do some stuff and create action. And not like going out like campaigning and petitioning, but just like having a bit of fun. And like, if you want to make a few cakes for some people, or if you want to be
cakes.
If you want to be Prime Minister Cameron and bring in some sweets or healthier treats, then you do that.
Nice.
But it's about not imposing on them and letting them really direct themselves in their lives and having autonomy.
Complete autonomy. I love that. So listen, I'm just going to quickly do the old switcheroo on my my battery, because I quite clearly didn't charge it this morning. But what I want to do now is I want to just fire some conversations at you, and I just want to get a little bit of value out to people listening, and people who potentially are interested in what you do, Luke Swann. So, okay, Luke, so you work a lot in schools, you meet a lot of parents, kids, teachers. How are kids supposed to deal with their own mental health issues these days? Is there enough being done for them?
No, there's not enough being done. I think progressively we're starting to do more and more, which is really good, but there isn't that much which is being done for young people's mental health. I think that it's first and foremost the responsibility of adults to be looking after children and considering their well-being. Mm-hmm. So as people, I think we should be all educating ourselves and encouraging our schools and our local councils to get these things put more in place.
But look, I mean, we're very lucky in this country that we don't have access to guns, right? And so mass shootings don't really, never really happen, touch wood, in the UK. If a kid is starting to show signs of, I don't know, what are the signs? What should parents be looking out for in order to see whether or not their kid is suffering with a mental illness, if that's even the right term?
We have mental health disorder or mental illness, ill mental health or ill health. I think, first of all, consider that all people are individuals and they're all very different, and we've all got very baselines in certain areas of our lives. So I think that if you're seeing your child experience like particular like stress or anxiety or worry, then they're the call out signs. But I think it's really good to first of all know the child really well, and to be able to notice any differences that might occur. Because as they start to develop, we see that these differences are occurring. And now it's obviously normal that we change as we grow up. But perhaps if they're starting to be more withdrawn, they're becoming really reluctant to go to
Yeah,
school.
but here's the thing, man. Like, kids are already withdrawn, right? They come home, they go up to their bedroom, they
To a
go
certain
on
degree.
social media, right?
Yeah, that to a certain degree though, but there's a healthy amount of withdrawal and spending time by ourselves, and there's even a healthy amount of time to be on social media. Like, I think it's too much now at the moment, but there is a healthy amount, and it's about
But
noticing these changes. I think, and another thing you can do is, if you're not too sure as well, is you can look at some of the like Young Minds, for example, and other mental health charities that work with young people, and they produce really simple and then some even really detailed kind of like infographics and reports into what these early signs are. But a lot of them do tend to be around like just them experiencing like changes in quite significant ways, and like withdrawing and not showing as much interest in the things that they might usually do.
so what about like bullying and sort of what's the approach to modern day bullies?
When you say to bullies, do you mean to the person being bullied or the
Yeah,
bully?
yeah. I mean, look, I'm sure we've all experienced a little bit of bullying. I was about to stereotype then.
Yeah,
I experienced a bit of
yeah, I did
bullying.
as well when I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
younger. Yeah,
Well, not surprised with that hair, mate. But
I didn't
more,
have the hair then.
you
But
didn't have the hair then.
no, but I had a few other things which were sufficient enough to.
And so you remember what it was like back then. Now the bullying doesn't just stop when you leave school; it follows you home. You know, you literally go home, and now you got to be subjected to another 6 hours of online hate. How are parents supposed to deal with something like that?
Well, they don't have all of the answers by themselves, and it's important to acknowledge that. So I think that
Can we just
first of all,
ban them from social media? Can we not just say, okay, you come home, you don't go on social media?
that might be helpful in some situations. In other situations, it might isolate those young people from some of their other more productive peers.
Like punishing them for being bullied, basically.
It could be, yeah. And again, it's that safety and where to find a balance.
But they want to protect their children, right? So they're more than willing to do whatever it takes. And if they come home and they're getting, kids are getting emotional because they've been called X, Y, and Z on social media, then surely the parents' first job is just to say, right, don't go on social media.
Yeah, that could be one of them, yeah. I think if they're getting direct attacks on social media, then reporting those instances is, first of all, something
Who
that's
do you
really
report
important.
it to?
So I'd report it to the school of the children that are going so that they can relay that to the parents. But then there are also some really great organisations out there. And so if you type in, just with any of these problems, like, so I won't say anything specific because this could be bullying, it could be mental health, we could be talking specifically about depression or suicide or eating disorders. If you just Google, like, whatever the issue is, children help UK or wherever you are, it comes up with like some of the top charities and organisations that can help with these things. They've got some really great guides and supports on how to deal with these things, and they've got links to services who can come in and get involved if necessary. So I think it's really important that we don't just try and deal with these as isolated incidents. I think it's important that first of all, as a family, and consider like the family unit and community has eroded over time, and the state has taken more power, and business and media has taken more power. So first of all, I think within the family, trying to deal with this in that way and have an open discussion and talk about what the issues are around that and what then action they want to take collectively is really good.
So, I mean, the collective approach, you know, with support of families, isn't that only applicable to those who have families who are, you know, there for them? Obviously, if you're from a single parent background, you might not be able to give your child so much time, and how are children supposed to find the support from adults when adults are so busy and maybe won't have time for them?
So let's just all make a vow to make more time for children and consider their well-being and any bullying that they might go through, so that we can better help them first and foremost. I actually had a really difficult encounter with this, where an 8-year-old boy got in contact with the Prologue online, and he said I need some help because the Prologue offers help for
Wow.
children's mental health. And what we essentially do is we signpost and we provide useful resources from lots of different charities and stuff like that. So I thanked him for coming to speak to me and saying that it was good that he'd reached out to someone, but because I'm a stranger on the internet. I just need to speak to like an adult, so a parent or a caregiver,
Stranger danger.
just to get their
Yeah, of
consent.
course.
And he was really reluctant to do that because he couldn't have this conversation. And he said that he wanted to end his life because of bullying. This is an 8-year-old.
Jesus. 8 years old.
Yeah, for children at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old, the second biggest killer after accidental deaths is suicide.
Really?
At that age, yeah.
Wow.
So it's tremendously big, but that was a really difficult one for me because I can't go past those safeguarding procedures. So it was really difficult not to be
And
able to
how
give all
did
the
you
help.
deal with it? Is he okay now?
I'm not sure because I basically said, like, I wrote out a message. I said, if you can just write this to your, to give this to one of your parents, just to say, I've just been speaking to your son, and he reached out because of some bullying, and it's really affecting the way that he's feeling, and he wants a bit of, he wants some help, and he doesn't know what to do. And I said a couple other things in there, and then he didn't send it, and then so I just sent a few links to some charities that he could get in contact with, and then I just had to leave it there really. So that was a
Well,
difficult one, but that was
that's
me.
tough, man.
But I think
That's some
if you're
serious
there,
shit.
if you're there in a child's life, there is a lot more that you can do. So I think take them seriously, actively listen to what they've got to do, research the options that are available, get the school involved, any other services that are relevant. If it's something violent, get the police involved. If it's something that might involve the social services, get them involved. But charities are really, really great people to reach out to because you know that there's a lot of trust with them and they've got really high levels of practice. Much better than the NHS in many respects.
Yeah, these are the people that are truly dedicated, right?
Oh, definitely.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're
why
the
don't you tell
people.
us a bit more about your non-profit then? So, what does the Prologue do, and how can people get in touch?
So primarily it's around young people's empowerment. There are lots of different areas that we want to work in, but it's essentially about allowing young people to have a voice and a platform to talk about their needs and talk about the ideas that they have for this world and talk about the works that they might want to do and share with people. And it's also about them having some more control in their life and having a bit of power over the things that they're subject to. So, for instance, they go to school for 13 years, which is mandatory, and they don't decide how that's designed. They just have to go, even if they're being bullied. Now, imagine if you went into work and every day after you came out of work, you were getting physically beaten up,
Oh yeah,
threatened,
no.
and
That's
then
why I
you
work for myself, mate.
exactly, yeah, and then you were told you're not allowed to leave that. You have to go back there every day. Now, that is absurd and really horrific to imagine an adult going through that where they're forced to do that, and that's what lots of children have to go through. So it's about them having a lot of more control in their lives, being able to have more say over what they want to do themselves and to consider what they value, what they want to try out, how they want to help people they
Be a
want to
bit more
help.
mindful then, I guess.
Be a bit more mindful,
I like
definitely,
that.
yeah.
So, Luke, where can people find your work with the Prologue?
So with the Prologue, like the Prologue publications, we're on social media.
So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram.
Facebook,
You're on all of them, yeah.
Instagram, yeah, and Twitter. And then we've got the website, theprologue.org, and we've got a new website coming up for a book that we're doing. So yeah, the book I'm really excited about because it's a buy a book, give a book model. So for every book bought, a book goes to a child who doesn't own a single book at home, which there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of children who don't own a single book at home. And literacy is, by the Save the Children standards, the biggest indicator in a person's life outcomes. And it's definitely one of the top few.
Literacy.
Literacy literally is, yes.
Literally, I like that and I don't like that because I struggled with English at school, and I got kicked out of French so I could do double English, which was even worse. The only thing that really got me going was Shakespeare and the idea of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So my literacy is terrible, but my storytelling is good. And this is the tough thing, isn't it? Is that like we're being taught how to read and write, but we're not being taught how to necessarily write stories and film stories. So like my argument would be, and of course I'm biased, that all schools have a filmmaking in the curriculum, because if we've all got camera phones these days, then I don't understand why we're not making more video, knowing that we all have the ability for it. It's obviously in high demand right now. And that's something that I hope to kind of, push push forward when I, get a little bit more successful and be able to kind of use my resources to go back into schools and get more kids making films. So you make them create the beautiful stories in writing, and I'll make them film them.
I won't make them do anything.
Oh, no, sorry, we can't force
them.
we're not going to force them.
If they want to, we'll really support them and give them the resources that they need and the encouragement do that. And there are many who do want to make films, and indeed there are many of them that are making films. Like when I go in with Patrick, who's the videographer and filmmaker with the prologue, he brings his equipment in, and then the young people take control of that. Yeah, so it's like you've got like 9-year-olds interviewing 9-year-olds being filmed by other 9-year-olds,
chopping off ponytails with drones flying around. Is that what it is?
That might be happening elsewhere. Yeah, but no, I definitely agree with that. I think that there are so many different outlets and so many different ways in which you can express yourself and have an impact in this world, both from an educational perspective, from an entertainment and enjoyment perspective, and all the others. Filmmaking is a huge one of those, and with the amount of content that's on social media as well, there does need to be more, I feel, emphasis on the fact that this is what people are doing now, this is the way the world's changed. We can't stick with certain practices that we have. Like, I think we need to hold certain principles in, and that's why I'm always going to be passionate about books, even though the publishing industry is in decline. But I also acknowledge that there are other areas as well, and it was actually through working with you in your consultation about a year ago.
Yes, remember.
Where the idea of doing like an online education channel came into mind. And for me, with my wider vision of this world education system, is having schools with these educational models that I'm developing and have worked with other people and done research on. But it also has these, like, this online education channel where it's got these like really great sort of tips on how to do sort of filmmaking, how to do all these different things, and they're presented in like accessible formats on social media, where
like a CITV but online.
Yeah,
you
like
remember
that, yeah.
CITV?
Yeah,
My Parents are Aliens and that, and those kind of shows.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think there's definitely a lot more emphasis going into the online children's entertainment stuff. I know that the BBC are very much trying to get online, on digital. Too little, too late, in my opinion. And of course, the BBC still have their own remits, right?
Yeah, even with the BBC as well, though. Like, that's great for them to be taking that on board. But if you think of the format of a lot of social media is these shorter versions, and then you
short
watch,
form.
Yeah, the short form. So I think something like the structure and the model of Lad Bible, but not the content of Lad Bible, just to make a clear distinction. I think something like that.
I like it. Yeah. And like a BuzzFeed for kids.
Yeah, I call it. I think the name that I've got at the moment is the Prologue Times. So
that's a bit ancient, isn't it?
Times is like.
Times is like the New York Times.
It's like educational content that teaches, inspires, empowers, motivates.
I don't know if I like Times.
I just misspelled Times.
Acronyms are crap, man.
I really don't like
teaching, inspiring.
Teach, inspire. I just misspelled Times, so I'm going to be very careful.
Jesus, you be careful when reading Luke Swann's book. It's going to be full of
I've had a couple of editors, so they've been great at that. But no, teach, inspire, motivate, empower, and support. Generally speaking, that is what I'm looking to do with all of the stuff that we put online and all of that material. So that's a few. But yeah, we want a better name with that. We'll think of a better name.
Always call it Prologue. Drop the cleaner.
We're just rebranding at the moment. I've just got a new logo. We've dropped the.
You have dropped That's a quote from the Social Network film. Anyway, listen, Mr. Luke Swann, it's been an absolute pleasure joining you here in Manchester. I usually get people a present if they come onto my show. So when you're next down in London, we'll have to get you on the show, and I'll get you a present for sure.
Definitely. It's been such an honour, and I'm looking forward to doing some more work with you. So
let's do it.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Mr. Luke Swann, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Take care.